Hello everyone, wishing you a wonderful day. Today we're going to discover the heartbreaking story of a young girl who longs to join the festival. But poverty, family debt, and cruel laughter from people her own age keep pulling her back. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next ones. Pale morning light slipped through the leaves and spilled across the red dirt path as Tieu Lac walked alone, her sandals brushing softly over the earth. Around her, spring had already arrived in full color. The trees were greener, the wind gentler, and somewhere far ahead, beyond the fields and the market road, the festival had begun to wake. Even from this distance, she could hear faint laughter drifting through the air, the beat of drums, and the lively hum of people gathering. Tieu Lac slowed for a moment, turning her face toward the sound. She had always loved festivals. Ever since she was little, festivals had lived inside her heart like something magical. The glowing lanterns hanging in rows, the smell of grilled cakes and sweet syrup in the air, the laughter of girls her age, dressed in their prettiest clothes, walking side by side with bright eyes and excited smiles. The fireworks at night, the music, the noise. The feeling that, for just a few hours, life could become softer, brighter, lighter. She loved all of it, but loving something and being able to step into it were two very different things. Her expression changed. The small light in her eyes dimmed, and her voice, if anyone had been close enough to hear it, would have turned quieter. Because she was poor, and poor girls did not walk into festivals just because they wanted to. For someone like Tieu Lac, every coin had a purpose before it even reached her hand. Rice, salt, medicine, debt. Another debt after that, then one more still waiting at home like a shadow that never moved. In her world, joy cost money too. A skewer of sweets cost money. A cup of warm drink cost money. Even standing in the middle of a festival with empty hands, smiling like everyone else, somehow still felt like it cost something she did not have the right to spend. So when other girls dreamed of dresses and lanterns, Tieu Lac dreamed of repayment dates. When others listened for music, she listened for the weight of what her family still owed. The spring breeze moved past her, carrying the scent of wildflowers and smoke from distant food stalls. It should have felt lovely, but to her, it only made the road ahead feel longer. It reminded her that life kept moving, festivals kept returning, and yet she was always on the outside looking in. She stopped walking. From where she stood, she could not see the festival clearly, only a blur of movement beyond the trees and the faint rise of cheerful noise. For a few seconds, she simply listened. It was enough to make her chest tighten. Enough to make 100 quiet wishes rise and fall all at once. Then she lowered her eyes and kept going. Her steps were firmer now. It was not anger that pushed her forward, not bitterness. Tieu Lac was not the kind of girl who wasted strength cursing fate. What lived inside her was something quieter, something heavier. Acceptance. A young girl's acceptance that life had handed her a burden early, and whether she liked it or not, she had to carry it. The sunlight caught the side of her face as she walked, drawing attention to the fine line of sweat on her skin. It was not the heat that made her look strained. It was the effort of holding herself together, the effort of not turning back toward the sound of joy, the effort of choosing duty again, even while some softer part of her still longed to run toward the music like any other girl her age. That was the battle inside her. Youth pulling one way, responsibility pulling the other. Dreams in one hand, debt in the other. And as always, debt was heavier. By the time she reached the strawberry field, the morning had ripened into a pale, shining day. Rows of green leaves spread out before her, dotted with red fruit glowing under the sun. Tieu Lac crouched and began to work, her fingers moving carefully among the plants. Pick the ripe ones. Leave the small ones. Watch the stems. Don't bruise the fruit. Every berry mattered. For a while, only the rustle of leaves and the sound of her breathing filled the air. Then, almost like she was speaking to herself, she murmured softly. She imagined a day when she could go to the festival without fear. A day when she would not have to count coins in her palm before deciding whether she deserved a moment of happiness. A day without debt collectors, without the heaviness of worry sitting on her family's roof like a storm cloud. A day when she could stand under bright lanterns, buy something sweet just because it looked delicious, laugh at nothing important, and stay until the fireworks painted the whole sky red and gold. She imagined walking through that crowd with no burden on her chest. Just joy. Just youth. Just one evening where she could belong to herself. It was such a beautiful dream that it hurt. And maybe that was the cruelest part. Not that the dream was impossible, but that it felt close enough to touch and still impossibly far away. A gust of wind swept across the field. Somewhere in the distance, laughter rose again, carried clearly this time from the direction of the festival. Tieu Lac paused, berry in hand, and looked toward the horizon. Thin curls of smoke rose faintly in the far distance. Food stalls, no doubt. Music drifted in broken pieces. People were arriving. The day was unfolding exactly as she had once hoped to be part of. But her eyes returned to the basket beside her, to the rose she had not finished picking, to the fruit that still needed washing, to the syrup that needed heating, to the skewers that needed making, to the debts waiting at home. Her fingers moved again, but slower now, as though her body remained in the field while her heart had wandered somewhere else. She did not cry. Tieu Lac was beyond easy tears. Life had already trained her to swallow them before they reached her eyes. But her voice trembled when she whispered again, and that small tremor said more than tears could have. It carried the ache of a girl who understood too young that wanting something did not mean she could have it. The sky above her remained bright and indifferent. Spring was generous to everyone, but not equally. Time passed almost in silence after that. No more words. Just work. Tieu Lac's hands became swift and practiced. She picked strawberries until the basket was full, then carried them back and washed them in cool water. She trimmed away the leaves, sorted the best ones, and set a pot over the fire. Steam rose, syrup thickened. One by one, she dipped the fruit, turning each piece carefully until it gleamed beneath the coating. Then came the skewering, the cooling, the arranging. Stick after stick began to take shape, shining red under the daylight like tiny jewels. What had started as fruit from the earth slowly became something beautiful, something sellable, something hopeful. When the last batch cooled, Tieu Lac packed the candied sticks carefully into her basket. She laid them in neat rows, adjusting them so they would not stick together or crack. Her fingers were gentle, almost tender. These were not just sweets, they were a day's labor, a chance, a small bridge between survival and disappointment. Once everything was ready, she lifted the basket and started walking toward the market. The closer she came, the louder the world became. Voices overlapped in cheerful bursts. Vendors called out. Children laughed. Music from the festival spilled into the streets in lively waves. The whole spring market felt awake, glowing with movement and sound. It was exactly the kind of place Tieu Lac usually watched from the edge, never fully entering, never fully belonging. Today, she stepped inside with her basket in both hands. Not as a guest, not as a girl coming to enjoy herself, but as someone who had come to earn. She found a quiet corner and stopped there. The basket rested before her, the candied strawberries catching slants of sunlight beneath the market canopy. Around her, people moved in clusters, talking, smiling, buying, living. For a second, her fingers tightened around the strap. This was the real test now. the field had been quiet. Work in the field only demanded effort, but the market demanded courage. Would today bring enough to ease even a small part of the debt? Or would she return home with most of the basket still full, carrying not just unsold candy, but another day of failure? Tieu Lac drew in a slow breath and lifted her chin. Her heart was beating faster, but her face stayed calm. Then, in a voice soft yet steady, she called out for the first time. Tieu Lac is a young girl with a simple dream, to join the spring festival like everyone else her age. She loves the music, the lanterns, the laughter, and the sweet smell of festival food. But poverty keeps her at a distance. While others enjoy the celebration, she must think about family debt and daily survival. Instead of following her heart, she spends the day picking strawberries, making candied fruit, and preparing to sell them at the market. Even though she feels hurt and left behind, she stays strong and keeps working. At the market, Tieu Lac gathers her courage and begins selling her candy sticks. Little by little, customers come, and each sale gives her a small sense of hope. Her story is a quiet but emotional portrait of sacrifice, resilience, and a young heart torn between dream and responsibility.